I pressed the decline button for the 47th time that week. My daughter Natasha's name disappeared from my phone screen, and I set it down next to my untouched tea. The silence in my apartment felt different now. Not lonely, but earned, deserved. I'm Evelyn Richardson, and at 68 years old, I finally learned that sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone you love is to keep saving them from themselves. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Let me take you back to where this all started, though honestly, I don't think there was ever just one beginning. Maybe it started when Natasha was 7 and her father Marcus walked out on us, leaving nothing but divorce papers and an empty closet. Or maybe it started earlier, when I was too young to understand that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just fear dressed up in sacrifice. I raised Natasha alone in Seattle, working as a physical therapist at 3 different clinics to keep our small house and put food on the table. I worked morning shifts at the Sports Medicine Center, afternoon appointments at the seniors facility, and evening sessions with private clients. Some weeks, I barely saw daylight. But I told myself it was worth it. Natasha needed stability, needed to know that even though her father left, I never would. She was brilliant, my daughter. Straight A's through high school, accepted to the University of Washington with a partial scholarship. I covered the rest, of course. What else would a mother do? I took on extra clients, worked weekends, and somehow made it happen. When she graduated with a degree in marketing, I was the proudest person in that auditorium. Then she met Julian. I should have seen the red flags immediately. Julian was charming, devastatingly so, with perfect dark hair and a smile that could convince you the sky was green. He worked in tech consulting, which seemed to mean he had a lot of important meetings but no steady paycheck. Natasha moved in with him 6 months after graduation into a trendy apartment in Capitol Hill that I later learned I was partially funding through her temporary rent help. The phone calls started small. "Mom, I'm a little short this month. Julian's big project got delayed, and rent is due. $500. Then it was the car repair. $800. Then Natasha's student loans, which apparently she couldn't manage on her marketing coordinator's salary, $400 a month, which somehow became my responsibility. I said yes every time. What kind of mother says no when her child needs help? But the pattern became darker, more insistent. Julian convinced Natasha to quit her stable marketing job, to join his startup. I never quite understood what the startup did. Something about social media analytics and influencer partnerships, but it was always just 6 months away from the big breakthrough. 6 months became a year became 3. During those 3 years, I funded their lives. Not just rent money anymore, but groceries, utilities, Julian's business expenses, new laptops for the company, networking event fees, a trip to a tech conference in Austin that absolutely could not be missed. The numbers started blurring together. 10,000, 20,000, 35,000. Each transfer came with a promise. This was the last time. Things were turning around. The big client was about to sign. The investors were almost committed. Meanwhile, my own life shrank. I postponed the knee surgery I needed. I canceled the trip to Maine I'd been planning since my retirement. A retirement that kept getting pushed further away because I couldn't afford to stop working. My savings account, once comfortably padded for my later years, began to look skeletal. The visits were worse than the phone calls. Natasha would show up at my apartment with Julian, and while she hugged me and told me she loved me, I could see her eyes calculating, cataloging what I had that might be converted to cash. Julian would compliment my vintage furniture, casually mention how much mid-century modern pieces were worth these days. Natasha would notice my mother's pearl necklace on my dresser and remember how much she'd always loved it. Hint that it would mean so much to have something of Grandma's. I gave her the necklace. I gave her everything. 3 Christmases passed, where they promised to come for dinner and canceled last minute. 2 Thanksgivings where I cooked full meals and ate alone when they texted that Julian's family needed them more. My birthday last April, my 67th, passed without a call. When I mentioned it gently a week later, Natasha got defensive. God, Mom, we're dealing with a lot right now. The startup is in a critical phase. Not everything is about you. Not everything is about you. Those words echoed in my head for days, but I kept giving. Because what else did I know how to do? The breaking point came last November, though I didn't recognize it as the breaking point until much later. Natasha called on a Tuesday afternoon. I was between clients, eating a sandwich in my car, when her name lit up my screen. Mom. Her voice was strained, urgent. Mom, we need your help. It's an emergency. My heart dropped. Are you okay? Are you hurt? No, nothing like that. It's just, we're going to lose everything, Mom. The apartment, the business, everything. Julian's investor pulled out at the last second, and we're 60 days behind on rent. The landlord is starting eviction procedures. We need $15,000 by Friday or we're out on the street. $15,000 by Friday. It was Tuesday. Natasha, honey, I don't have $15,000 just sitting. Yes, you do. You have that retirement account. You can take a loan against it. Please, Mom, please, we'll pay you back as soon as the next investor comes through. Julian has meetings scheduled with 3 firms next month. This is just temporary. We just need to get through this rough patch. I thought about my retirement account. It was all I had left. The absolute last safety net between me and complete financial insecurity in my old age. Sweetheart, I can't. That money is for when I can't work anymore. For when. So you're just going to let your own daughter become homeless? That's what you're telling me? After everything Julian and I have done, how hard we've worked, what have you done? The words came out before I could stop them. Natasha, I've given you over $50,000 in 3 years. You quit a good job for a startup that's never made a profit. When have you... Oh my God. Her voice went cold. I can't believe you're actually keeping track. Like you're some kind of accountant tallying up everything you've ever done for me. That's sick, Mom. That's really sick. I'm not trying to keep track. I'm just saying that I've helped as much as I possibly can. And I need to... You need to what? Keep your precious money safe while your daughter suffers? While Julian and I lose everything we've built? What have you built, Natasha? I asked quietly. Really? What have you actually built? The silence on the other end was arctic. Julian was right about you, she finally said. He said you were controlling, that you use money to manipulate me, to keep me dependent on you. I defended you, Mom. I told him you were just trying to help. But he was right, wasn't he? You want me to fail. You want me to come crawling back so you can feel needed. Each word was a knife, sharp, precise, intentional. That's not true, and you know it. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you've never supported my relationship with Julian. You've never believed in our business. You've just been waiting for us to fail so you can say, I told you so. I've given you $50,000, Natasha. $50,000. How is that not supporting you? Come on. Payback. Figure it out ourselves. Maybe we should have done that from the beginning. Natasha, don't call me anymore. I mean it. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at our apartment. I'm done with your conditional love and your manipulation. Julian and I are going to make it without you, and when we do, you're going to regret this conversation. The line went dead. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the physical therapy clinic, sandwich forgotten, hands shaking. What had just happened? How had my attempt to set one small boundary turned into being accused of manipulation and conditional love? I called back. Voicemail. I texted. No response. I waited 2 days and tried again. Nothing. A week passed, then 2, then a month. The silence was absolute. At first, I was frantic. I imagined them evicted, living in their car, destitute and suffering. I lay awake at night, wondering if I'd made the wrong choice, if $15,000 was really so much to ask when my daughter needed me. But then something shifted. Maybe it was my friend Patricia, another therapist at the clinic, who asked me one day why I looked so exhausted. I told her everything: the years of giving, the mounting debt, the phone call, the silence. When I finished, I expected sympathy. Instead, Patricia looked at me with something close to frustration. "Evelyn," she said carefully, "do you hear yourself? You've been funding two adults' lifestyle for 3 years. You've depleted your retirement. You've postponed your own medical care. And when you finally set one boundary, your daughter verbally abused you and cut you off. Does any part of that sound like a healthy relationship?" "She's my daughter." "Yes, and you're a person who deserves to be treated with basic respect and appreciation. But what if they really do get evicted? What if something terrible happens?" Patricia leaned forward. "Evelyn, they're adults. They have options: cheaper apartments, roommates, jobs, actual jobs with paychecks. What they don't have anymore is you as a backup plan. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what they need." I went home that night and did something I'd been avoiding. I pulled up my bank statements for the past 3 years and added everything up. Not just the big transfers, but the small ones too. The dinners I'd paid for, the groceries I'd bought them, the insurance payment I'd covered, the phone bill I'd been paying because Natasha needed to keep her number for business contacts. $73,000. In 3 years, I'd given them $73,000. I was 67 years old. I'd worked my entire adult life, and I'd given my daughter enough money to buy a small house. For what? For a startup that existed only on paper? For a man who'd never once thanked me? Who'd actively turned my daughter against me? For the privilege of being needed to confront the reality of what I'd allowed to happen. That night, I also made a decision. I wasn't going to reach out anymore. No more calls to voicemail. No more unanswered texts. If Natasha wanted a relationship with me, she knew where to find me. But I was done chasing someone who clearly didn't want to be caught. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. December came and went. Christmas was lonely, but I spent it with Patricia and her husband Thomas. We watched old movies and ate too much pie, and for the first time in years, I didn't spend the holiday waiting for a phone call that never came. January arrived with Seattle rain and a strange, settling calm. I started going to a therapist myself, a woman named Dr. Chen who specialized in family dynamics and codependency. That word, codependency, felt like a revelation and an insult all at once. "You taught your daughter that your role was to solve all her problems," Dr. Chen explained, during our 3rd session. "And because you were so good at that role, she never learned to solve them herself. Now she's 30 years old and has no idea how to function without you. And she resents you for it." She resents me for helping her? She resents you for the unspoken expectation that came with the help. You never asked her to be responsible. You just kept giving. And every gift came with an invisible string attached. The string of obligation, of guilt, of unpaid debt. She felt that weight even if you didn't intend it. And the only way she knows how to escape that weight is to cut you off completely and tell herself you're the villain. It was the clearest anyone had ever been with me, and it hurt more than any of Natasha's words. February brought something unexpected. I was at the grocery store, loading produce into my cart, when I saw Julian. He was alone, looking significantly less polished than I remembered. His hair needed cutting. His clothes were rumpled. He was scanning the clearance section of the frozen food aisle with the intensity of someone calculating every dollar. He saw me before I could turn away. Evelyn. He approached with his hands up, like I was a spooked animal. Hey, how are you? Julian. I kept my voice neutral. I'm fine. How are you? We're managing. He shifted his weight and I noticed his shoes were worn at the heels. Look, I know things got heated last time we talked. Well, last time you and Natasha talked. I just want you to know that we're figuring things out. We didn't get evicted. We found a cheaper place in Renton. And I got a part-time job. Just retail. But it's something while we keep working on the business. That's good, I said carefully. I'm glad you're finding solutions. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. Natasha doesn't know I'm talking to you. She's still pretty angry. But I wanted to say... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I wanted to say that maybe you weren't completely wrong about us needing to stand on our own feet. It's been hard, but we're learning. I waited. Was this an apology? An acknowledgement? Anyway, he continued, I know Natasha misses you. She won't admit it, but she does. Maybe give her some more time. She's proud. You know how she is. Yes, I thought. I know exactly how she is. I made her that way. Thank you for telling me, I said. Take care of yourself, Julian. I walked away before he could say anything else. My hands were trembling again, but not from fear or guilt this time. From anger. From the audacity of him thanking me for teaching them a lesson they should have learned a decade ago. From the casual cruelty of give her more time, as if I were the one who'd done something wrong. March brought my 68th birthday. Patricia took me out to dinner at a nice seafood restaurant on the waterfront. We split a bottle of wine and laughed about her terrible patients and my worse ones. For dessert, they brought out a small cake with a candle, and Patricia and Thomas sang off-key, and I made a wish that had nothing to do with Natasha. I wished for peace. Just peace. When I got home that night, there were 3 missed calls from Natasha. No voicemail. Just calls. My finger hovered over the callback button. Dr. Chen's voice echoed in my head. You don't owe anyone access to you, Evelyn. Not even your daughter. Especially not your daughter if that access is being used to harm you. I set the phone down and went to bed. The next morning, there was a text. Mom, Julian and I really need to talk to you. It's important. Can we come by? I stared at that message for an hour. Important. Everything was always important when they needed something. I typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on the truth. I'm not ready to see you yet. When and if I am, I'll let you know. Her response came in seconds. Seriously? After 4 months, you're still holding a grudge? We're family, Mom. Family forgives. Family also respects boundaries, I typed back. I'll reach out when I'm ready. Wow. Just wow. Don't bother reaching out. Julian and I are doing fine without you anyway. Better, actually. We don't need your negativity in our lives. And that was it. The door slammed shut again. But this time, I didn't cry. This time, I felt something unexpected. Relief. April arrived with cherry blossoms and the realization that I'd been sleeping better. The constant low-grade anxiety that had hummed under my skin for years, the waiting for the next call, the next crisis, the next need, had finally quieted. I woke up in the mornings and made decisions based solely on what I wanted to do that day. It was revolutionary. I took the trip to Maine. I'd been planning it for 5 years, and I finally booked the tickets with money from my carefully rebuilt savings account. 2 weeks exploring coastal towns, eating fresh lobster, watching the sunrise over rocky beaches. I felt 20 years younger. When I posted photos on my Facebook, something I rarely did, I got dozens of comments from old friends I'd lost touch with. You look so happy. So glad to see you taking time for yourself. This is wonderful, Evelyn. Natasha saw them too. I know because she sent me a message. Nice to see you can afford a fancy vacation while your daughter struggles. I almost responded. Almost. But Dr. Chen's homework assignment had been clear. Notice the impulse to defend yourself. Notice the impulse to explain. Then let it go. I let it go. When I returned from Maine in early May, there was a letter in my mailbox. My address written in Natasha's handwriting, but the return address was somewhere in Renton I didn't recognize. I made myself a cup of tea before opening it, sat down at my kitchen table with the late afternoon sun streaming through the window. Took 3 deep breaths. The letter was 4 pages long. Mom, I don't even know how to start this. Julian keeps telling me to just call you, but I can't seem to make my fingers dial your number. So I'm writing instead, hoping you'll actually read this and not just throw it away. Though, honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you did. I've been thinking a lot about the last fight we had, about the things I said to you. Julian says I should apologize, and he's right. But it's more complicated than that. I was so angry at you. I felt like you were abandoning me when I needed you most. But the more time passes, the more I'm starting to see things differently. We did lose the apartment. We're in a tiny 1-bedroom in Renton now, and it's not great, but we're managing. Julian got that retail job, and I started working at a marketing agency again. It's not as exciting as the startup, but it's steady money. We're learning to budget. It's humiliating, honestly. We're 30 years old and learning things we should have figured out a decade ago. I think that's what I'm really angry about. Not that you wouldn't give us the $15,000, but that you're not giving it to us forced me to see how badly we'd been managing our lives. How much we'd been depending on you as a safety net. How we'd convinced ourselves that we were entrepreneurs and innovators, when really we were just 2 irresponsible adults spending someone else's money. That's hard to admit. It's hard to look at the last 3 years and see how much time we wasted, how much of your money we wasted. And it's hard to admit that maybe you were right to finally say no. But here's what I can't get past, Mom. I'm mad at you for letting it get this bad. Why didn't you say no sooner? Why did you keep giving us money when it was clearly hurting you? Why didn't you sit me down 2 years ago and tell me that I was going down the wrong path? I know that's not fair. I know I'm trying to make my mistakes your fault. Julian tells me that's what I'm doing. But I can't help feeling like you failed me somehow. Like you should have been the adult and set boundaries earlier. I don't know if I'm ready to see you yet. I'm still working through a lot of stuff, but I wanted you to know that I don't hate you. I just don't know how to be around you right now without feeling ashamed of everything I've done. Maybe someday we can try again, just not today. Natasha. I read the letter 3 times. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone recognizing absurdity so profound it transcends anger. My daughter had written me a 4-page letter where she simultaneously acknowledged her mistakes and blamed me for not preventing those mistakes. She was angry at me for enabling her, while being angry but I'd stopped enabling her. The codependency was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I showed the letter to Dr. Chen at our next session. How do you feel about this? She asked. Honestly, free. Because this letter makes it crystal clear that Natasha isn't ready to take full responsibility for her choices. She's making progress, yes, but she's still looking for someone else to blame. And I can't fix that for her. Only she can. Dr. Chen smiled. That's exactly right. So what do you want to do? Nothing, I said. I want to do absolutely nothing. No response. No engagement. Just let her sit with her own thoughts for a while. And that's what I did. Summer came. I took up watercolor painting at the senior center. I joined a book club. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping survivors of domestic abuse navigate the practical aspects of rebuilding their lives. The work was challenging and meaningful in ways my physical therapy practice never had been. One of the women at the shelter, a 34-year-old named Carmen, who was rebuilding after 15 years with an abusive partner, asked me one day why I volunteered there. I thought about lying, giving some noble answer about giving back, but something about Carmen's direct gaze made me tell the truth. I'm learning to recognize the patterns, I said. The ways we hurt each other in families, the ways love can become a weapon. I think I need to understand it better so I can forgive myself. Carmen nodded slowly. You got kids? A daughter. She the one who taught you about that? In a way. Though really, I taught her first. I just didn't realize I was doing it. Yeah, Carmen said quietly. That's how it works, isn't it? We pass down the hurt without meaning to. The trick is figuring out how to stop the cycle. Her words stayed with me for days. In July, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Richardson? A woman's voice, professional, cautious. Yes? This is Detective Maria Santos with the Seattle Police Department. I'm calling about your daughter, Natasha Patterson. My heart stopped. Every terrible possibility flashed through my mind in an instant. Car accident. Assault. Worse. Is she hurt? Is she okay? She's fine, ma'am. She's not injured. But she and her partner, Julian Weaver, were arrested this morning on charges of wire fraud and identity theft. The world tilted. What? They've been running a scheme for approximately 2 years, taking out credit cards and small loans using stolen identities. We've identified at least 12 victims so far. The total damages are estimated at over $200,000. I sat down hard on my couch. I don't understand. Natasha is my daughter. She's not a criminal. There must be some mistake. We have substantial evidence, Mrs. Richardson. Security footage, email records, witness statements. I'm calling because your name has come up in our investigation. We need to verify that you haven't been victimized yourself. Victimized? By my own daughter? It's more common than you'd think in these cases. Have you noticed any unusual activity on your credit cards or bank accounts? Any accounts opened in your name that you don't recognize? I was too stunned to process the question properly. I don't think so. I haven't checked in a while. I'd recommend doing that as soon as possible. If you do find anything suspicious, please contact me immediately. She gave me her direct number. Also, Mrs. Richardson, your daughter has been asking to call you. She's entitled to one phone call, and she's chosen you. If she does call, you're under no obligation to accept the charges or to speak with her, just so you're aware. Thank you, I managed to say. When I hung up, I sat in my living room for an hour, completely still, trying to understand what I'd just learned. My daughter was a criminal. Not just irresponsible or misguided, but actually actively engaged in fraud. For 2 years. While I was giving her money, while I was funding what I thought was a struggling startup, she'd been stealing from strangers. Had she been stealing from me too? I logged into my bank account with shaking hands, checked every transaction for the past 3 years, looked for anything I didn't recognize, any amounts that seemed off. There, last October, a transfer I didn't remember making, $1,500 to an account I'd never seen before. And there, in March, $2,000. In June, $3,500. 7 transfers total, almost $18,000. Moved from my account to accounts I didn't recognize on dates when I'd been working long shifts and not checking my balance carefully. She'd been stealing from me, my own daughter. While asking for money with one hand, she'd been taking it with the other. I called Detective Santos back, gave her the information in a voice that sounded eerily calm even to my own ears. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Richardson," she said gently. "I know this must be incredibly difficult. What happens now?" "We'll add this to the evidence. It actually strengthens our case significantly. Family members are often reluctant to press charges, so the fact that you're willing to cooperate is important." "I haven't said I'm willing to press charges." There was a pause. "You don't have to decide right now. Think about it. talk to a lawyer if you need to. But I will tell you that without victim cooperation, these cases are much harder to prosecute. And this is Richardson? If your daughter did this to you, her own mother, she likely did worse to the strangers she victimized. Those people deserve justice too. That night the jail called. I accepted the charges. Mom? Natasha's voice was small, frightened, nothing like the angry woman who'd cut me off 4 months ago. I'm here. Mom, I didn't do it. This is all a huge misunderstanding. Julian got involved with some bad people, and they used our information without our knowledge. We're victims here too. We need a lawyer, Mom. A good one. They're saying I could go to prison for years. Years, Mom. Please, you have to help us. I was quiet for a long moment. In the background, I could hear the sounds of the jail, voices, doors clanging, the echo of institutional life. Did you take $18,000 from my bank account? I asked quietly. The silence was devastating. Mom, I can explain that. We were desperate. The startup was failing, and we needed. Did you steal from me while asking me for money? It wasn't stealing. You're my mother. What's yours is mine, right? That's what family means. Something in me crystallized in that moment, something that had been forming for months but had never quite solidified. No, Natasha, that's not what family means. Family means treating each other with respect, with honesty, with basic human decency. You stole from me. You've been stealing from me for a year, while also manipulating me for more money. And now you want me to pay for a lawyer to defend you for stealing from other people too? Mom, please, I'm your daughter. I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter. Yes, you are. And I love you, but I can't help you this time. What does that mean? It means I'm going to cooperate with the police. I'm going to press charges for the money you stole from me. And I'm not going to pay for a lawyer. You're going to let your own daughter go to prison? Her voice rose, panicked now. What kind of mother does that? The kind who finally understands that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their actions. I hate you, she spat. I hate you so much. You're dead to me. Do you hear me? Dead. I hear you, I said softly. Goodbye, Natasha. I hung up before she could respond. Then I turned off my phone and sat in the darkness of my apartment, feeling the weight of that decision settle over me like a blanket. I'd chosen myself over my daughter. I'd chosen justice over maternal protection. I'd chosen truth over the comfortable lie that family means tolerating abuse. Had I done the right thing? I called Patricia. She came over within 20 minutes, bringing wine and tissues, though I found I didn't need either. I pressed charges against Natasha, I said. Patricia pulled me into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you. She told me I'm dead to her. Then she's the one who died. You're more alive than you've been in years. The trial took 8 months to work through the system. Natasha and Julian both pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and identity theft in exchange for reduced sentences. Natasha got 4 years. Julian got 6. I attended the sentencing hearing, not to support Natasha, but to give a victim impact statement on behalf of myself and all the other victims who were too afraid or too ashamed to show up. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the front of the courtroom and looked directly at my daughter for the first time since the arrest. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The orange jumpsuit hung on her frame. Her hair was pulled back severely. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Your Honor, I began, my name is Evelyn Richardson, and I'm here to speak on behalf of a woman who spent $73,000 over 3 years trying to help her daughter build a life. A woman who sacrificed her retirement, her health, and her peace of mind because she believed that unconditional love meant unlimited support. I'm here to tell that woman, to tell myself, that she was wrong. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's just enabling. And the kindest thing I can do for my daughter now is to step back, and let her experience the full weight of her choices. Natasha, if you're listening, I want you to know that I do love you. I love you enough to not rescue you anymore. I love you enough to let you fall, to let you struggle, to let you learn that actions have consequences. Because that's what I should have taught you 20 years ago. To the other victims in this case, I want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that my failure to set boundaries with my daughter contributed to a pattern that eventually hurt you. I take responsibility for my part in creating a person who believed she was entitled to take whatever she wanted without consequence. And to anyone watching who sees themselves in my story, who has a family member they keep saving from their own bad decisions, I want to tell you this: it's not too late to stop. It's not cruel to set boundaries. It's not selfish to protect yourself. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. When I finished, I walked back to my seat. Natasha was crying. Julian was staring at the table. The judge looked at me with something that might have been respect. "Thank you, Mrs. Richardson," she said. "The court appreciates your courage in coming forward." The sentencing was finalized. 4 years for Natasha, 6 for Julian, who'd been deemed the primary architect of the scheme. They were sent to different facilities. Natasha to a women's correctional center about 2 hours from Seattle, Julian to a men's facility in eastern Washington. I drove home from the courthouse alone. Patricia had offered to come with me, but I needed the solitude, needed to process what I'd just done. I'd stood in a courtroom and told a judge, told the world that my daughter deserved prison time. The first month after the sentencing was strange. I'd expected to feel guilt, crushing waves of maternal regret. Instead, I felt lighter, like I'd been carrying a heavy backpack for years and had finally set it down. My shoulders literally felt less tense. The headaches I'd been having for months disappeared. I started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. Dr. Chen explained it as my nervous system finally shifting out of constant crisis mode. "You've been in fight or flight for 3 years," she said. "Your body was always waiting for the next emergency, the next demand. Now that you've set firm boundaries and followed through on consequences, your body can finally relax." The prison sent me information about visitation rights. I was on Natasha's approved visitor list. I could see her once a week if I wanted to. I put the papers in a drawer and didn't make an appointment. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I wasn't sure. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my own life, the life I'd neglected while orbiting around Natasha's chaos. In September, I finally had the knee surgery I'd been postponing for years. Patricia drove me to and from the hospital, stayed with me during recovery. Other friends from my book club and volunteer work brought meals, kept me company, made sure I didn't feel alone. During my recovery, lying on my couch with my leg elevated and pain medication making me pleasantly fuzzy, I had a revelation. I had a community, a real one, people who showed up not because they wanted something from me, but because they cared about me. When had that happened? When had I built this network of genuine relationships while I wasn't looking? I'd been so focused on the relationship I'd lost with Natasha that I hadn't noticed all the relationships I'd gained. In October, I received my first letter from Natasha. It came to my house, forwarded from the prison. I held it for 3 days before opening it. "Mom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I need to write this even if you never respond. I need to say things I should have said years ago. You were right about everything. Julian and I were using you. We convinced ourselves we were entitled to your money, that you owed us somehow. We told ourselves we'd pay you back someday when the big break came, but we knew that day was never coming. We were just lying to ourselves and to you. Prison is hell, Mom. It's everything you'd imagine and worse. but it's also given me time to think without distractions, without Julian in my ear, without the constant hustle of trying to make something out of nothing. I've been going to the classes they offer here. Financial literacy, basic accounting, job skills. I even got my GED in marketing renewed because apparently it had lapsed and I didn't even notice. I have a prison job in the library that pays 75 cents an hour. It's humiliating, but also kind of clarifying. This is what rock bottom looks like. Says I have something called narcissistic tendencies, stemming from never developing proper autonomy. She says, you and I had an enmeshed relationship where I never learned where I ended and you began. So I saw your money as my money, your resources as my resources. And when you tried to establish boundaries, I experienced it as an attack on my very self. So I'm trying to understand that. Trying to unpack 30 years of dysfunction. It's not easy, and most days I just want to blame you or blame Julian or blame the world. But the therapist says that's exactly the problem. I've never learned to take responsibility for my own life. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to write back. But I needed you to know that I'm finally starting to understand what I did to you, to us. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I read the letter twice. Then I put it back in its envelope and filed it away. I wasn't ready to respond. Maybe I would be someday, but not yet. In November, something unexpected happened. I was at the women's shelter helping Carmen prepare for a job interview when she mentioned she'd been approached by a local news station. They were doing a story on family financial abuse, and someone had given them Carmen's name as a possible interview subject. I don't know if I want to do it, Carmen said. It feels like airing my dirty laundry on TV. What would you say if you did it? I asked. I'd say that abuse isn't always physical, that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who convince us it's love, that leaving isn't the hard part, it's staying left. It's building a new life when everyone tells you you're abandoning your family. Her words hit me like a truck. You should do the interview, I said quietly. Yeah? She looked at me. Would you do it? If someone asked you about your daughter? I thought about it, really thought about it. A year ago, the answer would have been an immediate no. The shame would have been too much. The fear of judgment, of being seen as a bad mother, would have paralyzed me. But now I'd stood in a courtroom and told my truth. I'd chosen myself over the comfortable lie. I'd survived the worst judgment I could imagine. My own daughter telling me I was dead to her. And I was still standing. Yes, I said, I would. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the same news producer. Carmen had given them my name. Would I be interested in participating in their story about family financial exploitation? I said yes. The interview was scheduled for early December. They came to my apartment, set up lights and cameras in my living room. The reporter, a woman in her 40s named Jessica Park, had kind eyes and a gentle manner. Just tell your story, she said. In your own words. Don't worry about getting it perfect. We'll edit. So I did. I told them about raising Natasha alone, about the escalating requests for money, about giving $73,000 over 3 years while my own life shrank, about the final phone call where I said no and was cut off, about discovering the fraud, the stolen money, the courtroom, the prison sentence. What would you say to other parents in similar situations? Jessica asked. I looked directly at the camera. I'd say that love without boundaries isn't love. It's martyrdom, and it doesn't help anyone. I'd say that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them fall. Let them fail. Let them experience the natural consequences of their choices. And I'd say that it's never too late to choose yourself. Do you think you'll reconcile with your daughter? I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe someday. But reconciliation would require her to do substantial work on herself, to take genuine responsibility for her actions, and to understand that our relationship can never go back to what it was. It would have to be something new, something healthier. And I'm not sure either of us knows how to build that yet. Do you regret pressing charges? I thought about that question for a long moment. No, I finally said. I don't, because I think it was the first truly maternal thing I'd done in years. Not the comfortable thing, not the easy thing, but the thing that gave her a chance to change. The segment aired 2 days before Christmas. I watched it with Patricia and Thomas, feeling strangely detached from the woman on screen talking about her daughter in prison. My phone started ringing within minutes. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, old friends from my nursing days, people from my book club and volunteer work, all of them calling to say they'd seen the interview. They were proud of me. I'd been so brave. But the calls that surprised me most were from strangers. People who'd seen the segment and wanted to share their own stories. A father whose son had stolen from him to fund a drug habit. A sister who'd enabled her sibling for decades. A grandmother who'd just pressed charges against her own grandson for fraud. I thought I was alone, one woman told me, crying on the phone. I thought I was a monster for not helping my daughter anymore. But you showed me that sometimes not helping is the most helpful thing you can do. I stayed on the phone with her for an hour, listening to her story, sharing what I'd learned, offering no advice, but simply witnessing her pain. When I hung up, I realized something. My story, my pain, my difficult choice. It wasn't just about me and Natasha anymore. It was bigger than that. It was about a pattern that played out in families everywhere, a pattern of love twisted into obligation, of sacrifice mistaken for virtue, of enabling disguised as support. By speaking my truth, I'd given others permission to speak theirs. Christmas came. I spent it with Patricia and Thomas again, and this time Carmen joined us, along with 2 other women from the shelter, and one woman who'd called me after the news segment. We cooked together, laughed together, exchanged small gifts. It was loud and chaotic and beautiful. As I looked around my living room at these people who'd become my chosen family, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete. Whole. Not because I had my daughter back, but because I'd found myself again. In January, I received another letter from Natasha. This one was different. Mom, I saw the news interview. Someone's mother recorded it and sent it to her, and it made its way to me. I've watched it 4 times now on the small TV in the rec room. I need to tell you something. When I first saw it, I was furious. How dare you air our family business on TV? How dare you make yourself look like the victim when you were the one who pressed charges against your own daughter? But then I watched it again, and each time I heard things I hadn't heard before. I heard the pain in your voice when you talked about working double shifts to raise me alone. I heard the exhaustion when you described years of saying yes to every request. I heard the moment when you said, "Love without boundaries isn't love," and something inside me cracked. I've been thinking about boundaries a lot lately. I didn't have any. I thought I was entitled to everything you had because you and my mother, and mothers are supposed to give everything to their children. But that's not love, is it? That's just taking. That's parasitism. The therapist here showed me a diagram of healthy relationships versus codependent ones. In healthy relationships, there are 2 separate circles that overlap in the middle. That's the relationship. Each person maintains their own identity, their own boundaries, but they share something in the middle. In codependent relationships, it's just one big circle. No boundaries, no separate identities, just enmeshment and control and obligation all tangled together. We were one big circle, Mom. I didn't know where I ended and you began. And when you tried to draw a boundary, I experienced it as violence. Because if I wasn't enmeshed with you, who was I? I'd never developed my own identity separate from being your daughter, separate from being the person who needed you. I'm trying to become my own circle now. It's hard. Most days I fail, but I'm trying. I don't know if you'll ever want a relationship with me again. I don't know if I deserve one, but I wanted you to know that I'm working on becoming someone who could have a healthy relationship. Not just with you, but with anyone. Someone who takes responsibility. Someone who has boundaries. Someone who understands that love means respecting other people's autonomy, not consuming it. I have 18 months left on my sentence. When I get out, I'm not going to call you. I'm not going to show up at your door. I'm going to get a job, find a cheap apartment, and build a life that's actually mine. Not a life funded by you, or enabled by you, or dependent on you. Just mine. And then, maybe, if you want to, we could try being two separate circles that overlap in the middle. Not a mother and a dependent child. Not a savior and a victim. Just two adults who love each other enough to respect each other's boundaries. That's all I can offer. It might not be enough, but it's real, and it's mine. And I'm finally starting to understand the difference. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry it took prison for me to learn what that actually means. Natasha. I read that letter 5 times. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and wrote my first response in over a year. Dear Natasha, I received your letter. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for doing the hard work of self-reflection. Thank you for understanding what I was trying to do, even if I didn't understand it myself at the time. You asked if I'll ever want a relationship with you again. The answer is yes, but you're right that it can't be what it was before. It needs to be healthier, clearer, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. I've been doing my own work too, learning about codependency, about enmeshment, about the ways I enabled your dysfunction because it made me feel needed. Learning that being a good mother doesn't mean sacrificing everything. Learning that I'm allowed to have boundaries, to have a life separate from you, to choose myself. When you get out, don't call me right away. Build your life first. Show yourself that you can stand on your own feet. Get the job, get the apartment, establish your independence. Not to prove anything to me, but to prove it to yourself. Then when you're ready, when you've built that separate circle of your own, we can try meeting in the middle. Coffee, maybe. Somewhere neutral. 2 adults, both doing their best. Both trying to love each other in healthier ways. I'll be here. Not waiting, because I have my own full life now. But here, ready for that conversation when the time comes. I love you too. I always have. I just had to learn to love myself more. Mom. I sent the letter that afternoon, and then I went to my volunteer shift at the women's shelter, helped Carmen prepare for her new job, attended my book club meeting, and had dinner with Robert, who'd become a steady, comfortable presence in my life. I built something real, something that was mine. And if Natasha wanted to be part of it someday, there would be room, but there would also be boundaries. The months passed. Winter turned to spring, then summer. I received occasional letters from Natasha, and I responded to all of them. The correspondence was measured, thoughtful, honest. We were learning to communicate as adults rather than as mother and daughter locked in dysfunction. In August, I got a letter with different news. Mom, I'm getting out early. Good behavior and program completion. 3 weeks from now. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I've followed through on what I said. I have a job lined up at a nonprofit that helps formerly incarcerated people find employment. Ironic, right? I'll be making barely above minimum wage, but it's honest work helping people like me. I found a room in a shared house with 2 other women from the program. It's tiny, but it's mine. I'm paying for it myself. I'm not going to call you when I get out. I'm going to take 6 months to build my life, to prove to myself that I can do this. But then, if you're still open to it, maybe we could meet for coffee. Just coffee, nothing heavy. Just 2 people trying to figure out what a healthy relationship looks like. Only if you want to. No pressure, no expectations. Just a possibility. Love, Natasha. I sat with that letter for a long time. 6 months. She was getting herself and me 6 months of space before attempting contact. It was exactly the right thing to do. I wrote back with just 2 words. I'll wait. But I also added a line. Not because I'm suspended in time waiting for you to be ready, but because I'll be here, living my life, and there will be room for coffee when the time comes. 6 months later, almost to the day, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, Mom. This is Natasha. I got a new phone. I've been out for 6 months now. I'm working full-time, paying my own bills, going to therapy twice a week. I'm not the same person who went to prison. I'd like to show you who I've become if you're willing. Coffee? No expectations. Just 2 people talking. Let me know. Second, I looked at that message for a long time. Then I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd built in the 3 years since that first phone call, where I'd said no. The paintings I'd done in my art class hanging on the walls. Photos from my trips to Maine and more recently to Oregon's coast. Books from my book club stacked on the coffee table. An upcoming schedule on my calendar showing volunteer shifts, dinner plans with friends. A pottery class I just signed up for. And that's something I believed in. My life was full, genuinely full, not full of waiting and worrying and enabling. Full of things I'd chosen, people I'd chosen, activities that brought me joy. And now Natasha was asking for a small piece of that life. Not demanding, not manipulating, just asking. As an adult, as an equal. And now, Natasha was asking for a small piece of that life. Yes, coffee sounds good. There's a cafe on Pike Street called Brewed Awakening. Does Saturday at 2 work for you? The response came quickly. Perfect. Thank you, Mom, for everything. Especially for saying no when you did. See you Saturday. When Saturday came, I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early. Found a table near the window where I could watch the street. Ordered my coffee and tried to calm my nerves. What if this was a mistake? What if we'd both changed too much to find common ground? What if, Mom? I looked up. The woman standing in front of me looked like Natasha but different. Older, yes, but also more present somehow. More solid. She was dressed simply in jeans and a clean sweater. No makeup. Hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked nervous, but also determined. Natasha. I stood up, unsure whether to hug her or shake her hand or just sit back down. She solved the problem by pulling me into a brief, tight hug. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. We sat down, ordered her a coffee, sat in awkward silence for a moment. I'm not going to make this weird, Natasha finally said. I'm not going to apologize again or ask you to forgive me or try to explain away what I did. You know what I did. I know what I did. We can't undo it. Okay, I said carefully. I wanted to tell you about my life now, not to impress you or to prove anything, just so you know who I am these days. And she did. She told me about her job at the nonprofit, how she was helping other formerly incarcerated people navigate reentry, how she'd learned that she was actually good at that work, at understanding the barriers people faced and helping them problem solve. She told me about her roommates, about going to AA meetings even though she wasn't an addict, because the framework of personal responsibility and community support worked for her. She told me about therapy, about finally understanding the patterns that had driven her behavior. What about Julian? I asked. He wrote me a few times from prison. I didn't respond. We're done. We were never good for each other. We enabled each other's worst impulses. She paused. I'm not seeing anyone now. I'm focusing on myself. Maybe someday, but not for a while. I nodded. That sounds healthy. What about you? She asked. The news interview mentioned you'd been rebuilding your life. Tell me about it. So I did. I told her about my volunteer work, my art classes, my book club, about Patricia and the community I'd found, about my trips and my knee surgery and my full, satisfying life. You sound happy, Natasha said, and there was no resentment in her voice, just observation. I am, I said honestly, happier than I've been in a long time. Good, you deserve that. She took a breath. Mom, I need to say something, and I need you to just listen without responding yet. Okay. I know I hurt you. I know I took advantage of you for years. I know I said terrible things and cut you off, and then only came back when I needed something. I know I stole from you. I know I treated you like an ATM instead of a person. I said that. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. And I know that you doing the interview, pressing charges, letting me go to prison, I know that saved my life, because I was on a path that was only going to end one way. Either I was going to kill myself, slowly, through the consequences of my own terrible choices, or I was going to become an even worse person. You stopped that. You drew a line and said no further, and it was the hardest, most loving thing you could have done. A tear rolled down her cheek. So I need to thank you, not for being my mother, not for all the money you gave me before, but for finally treating me like an adult who needed to face consequences. Thank you for saying no. Thank you for pressing charges. Thank you for not rescuing me. Thank you for saving my life by letting me save myself. I was crying now too, quiet tears that I didn't try to hide. You're welcome, I whispered. We sat there for a moment, two women crying in a coffee shop, rebuilding something that had been completely broken. So where do we go from here? Natasha finally asked, wiping her eyes. Slowly, I said. We go slowly. Coffee once a month maybe. Getting to know each other as adults. Building trust. Learning what a healthy relationship actually looks like. No money, Natasha said firmly. I need you to know that I will never ask you for money again. Not for rent, not for emergencies, not for anything. My financial life is mine to manage. Agreed, I said. And I won't offer, because offering would be enabling. And I won't call you constantly or show up unannounced or try to make you responsible for my emotional well-being. And I won't try to fix your problems or give unsolicited advice or treat you like a child. We looked at each other and both smiled slightly. We were literally negotiating boundaries out loud. It was awkward and weird and absolutely necessary. This is strange, Natasha said. It is, I agreed, but it's also healthy. Yeah, she took a sip of her coffee. Yeah, it is. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. We talked for 2 hours, not about the past, but about the present and the future, about books she was reading and classes I was taking, about her coworkers and my volunteer work, about small, normal things that normal people talk about when they're building a relationship from scratch. When we finally stood up to leave, Natasha hugged me again. Same time next month? She asked. Same time next month, I confirmed. As I walked back to my car, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the mother who said yes to everything to the woman who learned to say no. From the person who believed that love meant sacrifice to the person who understood that love required boundaries. I'd lost my daughter for a while, but in losing her, I'd found myself. And now, slowly, carefully, we were both finding our way back to each other. Not as mother and dependent child, but as two adults, both doing the hard work of recovery. Both learning what healthy love actually looked like. It wasn't the fairy tale ending where everything was magically fixed. It wasn't the dramatic reunion with tears and apologies and instant forgiveness. It was quieter than that, more real. Two imperfect people trying to build something better from the ruins of something broken. And that, I realized, was exactly what I needed. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but honest. Not the old relationship resurrected, but something new being carefully constructed. A year has passed since that first coffee meeting. Natasha and I meet once a month, sometimes twice. We text occasionally. Normal things like, "How was your weekend?" or "Thought you might like this article." She's still at her job. Just got promoted to program coordinator. I'm still volunteering, still painting, still living my full, independent life. We're not as close as we were before everything fell apart. Maybe we never will be. But we're building something healthier, something sustainable, something based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Last month, Natasha brought someone to our coffee date, a woman named Lisa she'd been seeing for a few months. They were clearly nervous about me meeting her, which I found oddly touching. Natasha was worried about my approval, but in a healthy way, wanting me to like someone important to her, not needing my approval to validate her choices. Lisa was lovely, grounded, employed, kind. They'd met at an AA meeting. She'd been sober for 5 years and was studying to be a counselor. They talked about their plans carefully, realistically. Getting a place together in 6 months maybe. No rushing, no dramatic gestures. Just two adults building something stable. As I watched them together, I felt something unexpected. Pride. Not the old pride of a mother taking credit for her child's accomplishments, but genuine pride in watching someone I love become a fully formed, responsible adult. "What do you think?" Natasha asked nervously as Lisa went to the bathroom. "I think she's wonderful." I said honestly, "I think you're wonderful. I think you're building something real." And they said it just here. "We're trying," Natasha said. "It's hard. I have to work every day not to fall into old patterns. But Lisa calls me on my stuff, and I'm learning to accept that instead of getting defensive." "It's growth," I said. "Yeah," she smiled. "It is." When I got home that evening, I looked at the photo in my refrigerator, the new one from last month's coffee date. Me and Natasha and Lisa, all smiling, all present. Next to it was a photo of me and Patricia, and one of my book club, and one of me standing in front of a lighthouse in Maine. A full life, my life, with room for Natasha in it, but not centered around her. My phone buzzed, a text from Natasha. "Thank you for being so welcoming to Lisa. It means the world to me. Love you, Mom." And then I typed back, "Love you too. See you next month." Simple, clear, boundaried, and finally healthy. So here I am, at 69 years old, having learned the hardest lesson of my life, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to save them. That boundaries aren't cruelty but kindness. That you can love someone and still choose yourself. And finally, was I wrong to press charges against my daughter? Was I cruel to let her go to prison? Was I selfish to finally say no after years of saying yes? Finally, I don't think so. Not anymore. Because the woman I have coffee with once a month, the one who's building a real life based on responsibility and honest effort, she's someone who never could have existed if I'd kept enabling her. That woman was born in a prison cell, from the ashes of the entitled child I'd helped create. Sometimes destruction has to come before construction. Sometimes things have to fall completely apart before they can be rebuilt into something better. I destroyed our old relationship. I accept that. But from that destruction, we're both building something new, something healthier, something real. And in the process, I built myself a life worth living. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's ATM, not as someone's endless source of unconditional rescue, just as Evelyn. A woman with friends and hobbies and boundaries and self-respect. A woman who learned, finally, to love herself as much as she loved her child. That's my story. The story of how I learned to say no. The story of how I chose myself. The story of how love sometimes looks like letting go. If you're in a similar situation, if you have someone in your life who takes and takes and takes, if you're exhausted from always being the one who gives, I want you to know that you're allowed to stop. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to choose yourself. And that choice isn't selfish or cruel. It's necessary. It's healthy. It might be the most loving thing you ever do. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community of women who understand that our voices matter, that our experiences matter, that our boundaries matter, Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share your story if you feel moved to. Tell me what city you're listening from. Let's see how far these truths can travel. Let's build a community where women support each other in choosing themselves, in setting boundaries, in refusing to be diminished by the very people who should honor them most. S.M. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community, so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Strong. God bless you all. And remember, saying no to others is sometimes the only way to say yes to yourself. God bless you all. And remember, saying no to others is sometimes the only way to say yes to yourself. God bless you all. And remember, saying no to others is sometimes the only way to say yes to yourself.